The great Stoic philosopher Epictetus once told one of his students, "Don't show me what books you've read. Instead, tell me about those ideas. Tell me how they improve your life every day." Hello friends, this video is going to be slightly experimental for two reasons. First of all, as you might have noticed, I'm not surrounded by books as I usually am. The reason is because I'm visiting family and I'm recording this video not in my home. The second reason why I think this video is going to be slightly experimental is because I spent around 20 plus hours on each of my videos. I script them, I record them, I edit them. There is so much work going on each of the videos. But when you spend so much time on the production process, you lose that element of spontaneity. And recently I read a wonderful book that is completely changing my creative process by just the sheer amount of very concise and very practical advice. And the book that does all of this is written by Rubin. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It is just incredible book, and in one of the chapters Rubin says that artist needs to find ways of exploring that spontaneous creativity, that you can spend a lot of time planning your work of art or your creation, but you also need to integrate that element of spontaneity. And this video and this format that you are going to see right now is going to be my attempt to reignite that spontaneity into my videos. As I said, one of the books that has a really strong influence on me is Rubin's The Creative Act, A Way of Being. Rubin is one of the greatest music producers of our time. He produced one of my favorite bands of all time, System of a Down. System of a Down is just such an integral part of my identity because I grew up with them, I worship them, they were my favorite band. And I have to say, I was very hesitant about buying this book because I don't read books by celebrities, by music producers, but I heard that Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist who works at the Stanford University, he recommended this book, and he said that he reread this book 3 times because it has so much wisdom about the creative process. So he convinced me to buy, and it was a brilliant book recommendation. Each chapter of this book is dedicated to a very practical piece of advice that you can apply to your own creative process. And I really enjoyed this book because Rubin teaches us not how we can copy someone famous in order to gain popularity. He tells us about that the art is about maker, and that the ultimate goal of everything that you create is to express your own self, your own identity, who you are. And this is the reason, as I said, why I spend 20 plus hours on each of the videos of mine. I want you to meet me via each of those pieces. So I ramble a lot about these books, but if you would like to delve deeper into this book before purchasing it, I would recommend you to check my thread on Twitter where I shared all of my favorite ideas from this book in a kind of in a short thread, so you can get acquainted with it before purchasing it. So this is a great book. Another idea that really hovers around me other than creativity is kind of like revolves around history. You know, my interests are always all over the place. And the book that I'm reading right now was written by Tom Holland, who is one of the most respected British historians on ancient Rome. In one of his interviews, Tom Holland said an interesting fact. He said,
the more I reflected on this, the more I kind of started thinking, well, what changed? Where do my instincts, where do my assumptions come from? I realized that essentially my friends, the country, the civilization I live in is actually not really the heir of Greece or Rome at all. It's been profoundly and utterly shaped by Christianity, to the degree that I say in the book that we, all of us in the West, whether we are believers or non-believers, whether we are Jews, Muslims, Hindus living in the West, we are all of us, in a sense, goldfish swimming in Christian waters, because Christianity has so radically affected our assumptions, not just about ethics or morality, but about the most basic way we contemplate society.
He spent decades studying, researching ancient Rome, he felt that more he knew, more he learned about ancient Romans and their way of thinking, more foreign they start to feel for him, because he said that those people thought completely differently from ourselves. And he says that the reason that why they were so different, because of our Christian background. So he decided to write a history of Christianity, how the ideas of Christianity were born. And I found this to be really interesting, because I grew up in a very secular, in a very atheistic environment. Both of my parents were Christian, but like not practicing and stuff. And I come from Armenia, which considers itself to be one of the first Christian nations in history. So I thought like I will fill up the gaps in my knowledge about Christianity. And Tom Holland writes this with incredible sense of humor sometimes, and he has a chapter, like one of the last chapters of this book is dedicated to woke culture, where he says that even the woke culture is inspired by the Christian ideas. So I thought this to be really interesting. I'm just, I think, 20 or 30% through this book, but so far I'm really enjoying it. Another topic that has a lot of references in my commonplace book is resilience and how we can be more resilient. And recently, by pure accident, I discovered this book called The Art of Resilience, Lessons from Aeneas, written by Andrea Marcolongo. It is a very interesting book that explores the philosophy of resilience through one of the greatest poems of the Western culture. You know that the two essential poems of the Western culture is Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and the third one is Virgil's Aeneid. And Virgil's Aeneid tells us the story of Aeneas, refugee from Troy. After Troy was burned down by Greeks, Aeneas, one of the Trojans, has to flee, has to find refuge in Italy, and the fate destined him to create what we know as Roman Empire. But what makes the story of Aeneas unique, according to Andrea Marcolongo, is that it's not a story of a hero who slays, who wins. No, it's a story of a character who has to fulfill his duty. And in order to do this, he has to have incredible resilience, because he suffers one misfortune after another. He has to overcome each of them. And by making connections, Andrea Marcolongo tells us how we can develop our resilience, how we can become more stronger. She has a very interesting definition of courage. She says that courage is nothing but intelligent endurance. I found this book to be incredibly interesting, and I added a lot of those ideas into my commonplace book. So if you would like, I can share some of those ideas in my future newsletter. Just let me know in the comment section down below. The last two books have the exactly same title. One of them was written 2000 years ago. The other one was written contemporary, like 30 years ago or something like that, maybe 20 years ago. So let's start with the contemporary one, because the contemporary one is called The Consolations of Philosophy. It's written by Alain de Botton. I have to be honest, this book wasn't for me, because this book explored ideas from philosophy that I already read about in many other books. But this doesn't make this book necessarily bad. This book is still a very interesting book for people who don't know a lot about philosophy. In other words, it's a really great book which can serve as an introduction to philosophy. Alain de Botton is very interesting. She explores ideas from Socrates, Epicurus, Seneca. So it's a really great introduction to philosophy. And the last book on this list was written by Boethius, and I've reviewed it in my previous video. You can check it out. I think it is this corner. I think I finally learned which corner it is. So I'll tag it here. Boethius really showed me how you can deal with the external events, with the things that lie beyond your control. I always struggle to understand Stoics' perception of external things, that they say that there are things in our control and there are things that lie outside our control, and kind of after telling us about the things that lie outside of our control, Stoics don't develop the idea, don't delve into it, what it means to have something out of your control. While Boethius creates a whole new universe of how we can look at the things that lie beyond us, at the things such as fame, money, reputation, and he tells us that we should treat it as fortune, as an event that comes and goes, that we cannot control, that we can use fortune when it favors us, and we can learn when it turns against us. I would really encourage you to watch that video. I'll tag it as I said in that corner. I'm just trying to point it out as often as I can because I finally learned which corner it is. And two more updates before we'll go. I've interviewed John Sellers, who is one of the leading thinkers on Stoicism of our time. He has two great books called Lessons in Stoicism, a beautiful introduction to Stoic ideas if you would like to get yourself familiar with it. But he also recently published a book on Aristotle, which I found to be incredibly interesting. So that interview is going to come out next week. I'll let you know, but you can subscribe to my podcast, which will be linked down below. Another thing that I would like to mention is that in the recent edition of my newsletter, I've collected and assembled all the books that are going to be released this year, the books that I anticipate the most. If you are interested, that also will be linked down below. And of course, as I said, I would really love to hear your opinion about a video like this, a video that doesn't have all those cinematic fancy things. Did you enjoy it? Did you find it useful? Was it interesting to listen to it? Leave a comment down below, let me know. Everything will be linked down in the description. Family is calling, I have to go, and I'll see you next time. Bye.